Hello and welcome to my review of ManagementStudio. My name is Peter Von Oven, and in this, the fourth in a series of 5 videos, I'm going to continue my focus on the 4Cs methodology that I introduced to you back in the first few videos, and how ManagementStudio empowers your project teams by delivering an enterprise-class software platform to deliver transformation as a process. So let's continue with our introduction to the 4Cs, and the third of the 4Cs, which is for communicate. Now this, in my opinion, is the most critical part of any project and can either make or break the entire project in terms of whether it is deemed to be a success or a failure. Regardless of what the project team may state in saying the objective has been met, well, others may well have a different view. So why is communication so critical, you ask, given that I have also suggested in previous articles that all the other parts of a project are also equally as critical? While collecting data and controlling that data are of course key to any project, you can't do without accurate data. And that for me is a process that is very binary in nature. And by that I mean data is collected and then put to work automatically by the project team. It doesn't look at the data, apart from checking it's been captured. It's just captured and then acted upon. But in doing this, you are missing out on one critical factor, the human factor. The human factor, as I refer to it, is twofold. First, it puts context around your data. How are applications being used? Are they the right applications for the user? And if so, do they work as expected? Do they even use those apps? What other devices do they use? And are there ways to improve that end user experience? Data capture alone is not going to tell you any of this information. The second human factor is, as the 4C methodology in this review states, is to communicate. Quite simply tell people, those affected by the project, what's going on. Keep them involved and up to date with relevant information. But more than that, involve them, engage them. Don't treat them like mushrooms, as the saying goes. And if you don't know what that means, I'll let you Google that for yourselves. By involving those that are affected by the project or who come into contact with particular phases of the project, then it gives them a voice, a chance to provide real-time guidance and feedback that, when it comes to a project sign-off time, it becomes much easier to gain acceptance, as there should be no objections and certainly no nasty surprises. So how do we get people engaged? I find it's always polite to invite people to the party, in this case, your project party. With ManagementStudio, you can create your own custom email templates and, more importantly, make the emails engaging by actually personalising them using the data that is captured. For example, simply addressing the user by their name is already a good starting point than "Dear User" or "Dear Customer." Of course, being able to use your company branding also goes a long way. Make it personal. To enable this, emails are made up of 2 elements. First is the email wrapper that contains things like the header, formatting and the layout of the email. This means that you can fully customise the look and feel of an email and use that as a template going forward. The second element is the body of the email, i.e. what you are communicating to the user or recipient. The email templates are first categorised using the core ManagementStudio modules. So this falls under applications, user migrations, devices and deployment units. Drilling down to the next level on any of those core modules will allow you to manage the email templates for that chosen module. So emails for applications, migrations, devices, etc. Then within that module, you can create the emails that you need that are relevant to your project. As well as the welcome email, these could be survey emails, emails that allow the user to schedule their own migration time slot, or a set of email replies that are triggered when a user has completed a particular task or phase. Maybe they returned a survey and so an automated email is sent saying thank you very much for your time. Equally, it could be a reminder that they haven't replied yet and just give them a little gentle nudge to say, please reply. As you can see from what I have just discussed, emails can be sent via a time schedule or a triggered event. Key thing is they're all automated. So back to the email templates. As I said, you can create whatever you need and is required in order to communicate with your users. The on-screen example is an email template that's basically inviting users to a Windows 10 migration project. But there's one thing I want to highlight on this particular screenshot, and that is the conditional emails field. In this example, the conditional emails are based on different languages. Could be any other thing that you wanted to make the condition for. The welcome email in this example has been translated by the project team into different versions, all created as a child email from the main parent email, with each child being the same email subject, but in this case, a different language. So this example uses French as the language for an additional project welcome email. It's also worth just highlighting the fact that Management Studio doesn't do the translation for you. You'll need to write the email in the chosen language. But look, that's another good opportunity to get people engaged. Those with the right language skills. Get them to translate the email for you. They're engaged in the project. You then set the condition for Management Studio to check for a specific value that needs to be met before sending the email. And in this case, where the language is set to French or the country is set to France, then that is the condition met to send the email. The big advantage to conditional emails is that project admins simply send the email and Management Studio determines which version they should receive based on those conditions. So going back to making communication personal, I think this is a really nice touch, especially to communicate to the end users in their native language rather than just the US English that everybody seems to send. Just to finish off, now that we've looked at the project team side of things, what would the email actually look from the other side of the fence, from the recipient's view? So the example on screen now shows what an email could look like. Of course, it's completely customizable, but I'm sure you'll agree that this is a far more engaging and informative email than the typical plain text that you would often receive. If, of course, you receive anything at all. I've covered some of the foundational features on how to configure emails from the engine room perspective, if you like, and how they work. So next, I want to talk about the different types of communications you can send using this mechanism, such as surveys, feedback requests, or self-service scheduling. This is to engage the end user community on the project journey. As I've spoken about previously, you should always seek end user feedback at every step along the way throughout your project. Whether that is asking people about the project right at the beginning, requesting additional information, or just asking people to complete surveys on their overall experience once complete. Back in my video of the first of the 4 C's, capture, I talked about an example of where your directory service has not been updated and therefore could potentially contain inaccurate information and data. By asking the user directly, you can confirm the information is correct. For example, in the directory service, it may have the user's location as the Edinburgh office. However, they have now moved roles and are now based in Southampton. When it comes to migrating, then you would be expecting them to be in Edinburgh, right? It's their location that's stated. The directory service are not always kept up to date, but by sending out a user survey to actually ask them to proactively provide that information, you can help your project become more efficient. If you remember, you can even get Management Studio to update this directory information automatically by the power of APIs and PowerShell. In this example, just imagine trekking all the way up to Edinburgh for this one user to migrate them, only to find they're actually hundreds of miles away in Southampton. You could also ask them about the device or devices they use, any specialised peripherals they use, and another good one, and based on the applications that were captured and listed against their name, are there any of those applications they don't use but they still have them installed? As with all the communication features in Management Studio, you have complete control over what you send out to your end users and the questions that you ask. This is shown in the example survey creation page from the administration console on screen now. The information is simple for end users to complete, consisting of drop-down menus and checkboxes. The key here is to make it simple and not too onerous to complete, but ultimately that it is down to you to have full control over surveys and capture what you need. The previous example was more of a general information gathering exercise, but there may be the need to capture more detailed information on a specific application or a specific piece of hardware. Again, you can create a more specific survey request based on that one application or that one piece of hardware. Once the survey has been completed successfully, in Management Studio speak, the survey has been passed. Then the end user can automatically be moved to the next project process using the information provided. This could include updating the directory services if required, as we already mentioned. If the end user doesn't agree with the information or they raise questions in return, which is referred to as failing the survey, then they get put in the queue for one of the project team to review why and contact the user to discuss. Maybe more information is required. Maybe they're not ready for migration due to an outstanding issue. Regardless, this helps with the project process and progress and overall management, and again puts the end user front and center when it comes to communication. In our communication overview, we have so far looked at requesting additional and more generic information or asking specific questions about a particular application or piece of hardware. But there is another great use for using surveys and the Management Studio communication platform, and that use case is for testing. It goes without saying that if you change anything that is user-based, then you need to test it. In my experience, the majority of this testing is typically undertaken by the IT teams, who they decide whether something works or not. But in my opinion, that's often where projects go wrong. In the eyes of the IT team, and not by any fault on their part, the testing of an application is based on whether or not it loads, whether or not you can type in it or click on menus. I'm sure you agree that's not really testing or using the application. Yeah, I'm sure we've all done it. Yep, me too. It may be a specialised application and the IT team just don't have any experience of how it really works. That being the case, then the only people who can sign the application off as fully functioning are the guys that use it, the application owners or users. I've had first-hand experience of this when working with a CAD application that was migrated to a new platform. The IT team tested it, yes it loaded, yes you could navigate around the app, but when the user tried to load a 3D model and tried to manipulate that model, it all fell apart. And that was chalked up as a project failure, as the application was unusable, the cause of which was potentially based on a lack of communication and gaining end-user feedback before moving into production. Therefore, you need a mechanism to ask the right questions and capture this "does it work properly" information. And this is where Management Studio can turn the survey feature into a questionnaire designed to capture user acceptance testing and gain sign-off. With Management Studio, you can create custom surveys to get that feedback from end-user testing. The survey can be targeted at just those users that actually use the application, using the conditional email feature, as well as maybe the departments that use the application and the locations that it's used in, maybe using that deployment unit feature. And to gain even more communication brownie points, you could ask the application owners to write the survey themselves, so as to leave no stone unturned. And more importantly, to guarantee a successful outcome. That is, of course, if the application does work. As I come to the end of the communication overview, I thought it important to finish on one last really cool feature, and that feature being the self-service scheduling feature. Now we have all the information we need. We've collected automatically from our first of the 4 C's, capture. We've refined with a third of the 4 C's, communicate. See, I did say the 4 C's are all tightly integrated. It's now time to start actioning our project and actually start migrating. So with that in mind, I, as part of the project team, will just randomly pick a user, a date and a time, and I'll just go ahead and start their migration, purely based on the fact they've hit the 100% readiness phase. Is that a good idea? I'll let you decide on that. I can actually already hear the Management Studio team shouting at me going, "No, stop! What are you doing? How do you know they're actually ready? Are they on holiday? Do they have important meetings booked that would disrupt them?" Moreover, I've just spent this article demonstrating on how to put the end user first in everything that Management Studio delivers and as part of its integrated communication platform. Yet, here I am prescribing when they're going to be migrated. Not a good idea. So, I will stop and instead talk about the self-service scheduling feature. Rather than the project team deciding on when a user gets migrated, instead create a customized email sent to the users with a link to the Management Studio portal that allows them to select a time and date that is convenient for them to be migrated, not you. Ultimately, this feature puts the end user in control of when they get migrated, as they also have the ability to reschedule if required. It also enables the IT project team to schedule their time and know exactly when users are being migrated and trigger automation tasks at that date and time, such as adding the user's account to the required deployment groups. The project team can also report on who's left and who hasn't been scheduled. So that brings us to the end of this 4th video. In this review, I've given you an overview of the penultimate C of the 4 C's methodology, and that is communication. I know I keep saying each one is probably the most important one of all, but when it comes down to working with end users, then communication probably does, and rightly so, trumps all of the others. Whether it's just telling people what's going on, to allowing them to help tell part of their own story. Remember at the start of this video I mentioned the choose your own adventure story? Well, hopefully I have gone some way in demonstrating this, where end users share what they have, how they work and where they work from, right down to deciding when their adventure starts and their migration happens. With Management Studio and its integrated communication platform, you have this ability to communicate with your end users every step of the way, from that introductory email through to requesting additional information and allowing them to schedule their own migration time. I can't stress enough how important it is to get engagement at an early stage of any project if you want it to be a success, and continue that communication right up to the time of migration and even afterwards with follow-up check-ins to ensure that things are still working correctly and as expected. So what's next? In the coming weeks I'm going to record another video, and that will describe the final 4 C's, and that's collaborate, and how that plays its parts in the successful delivery of transformation. You can follow Management Studio on LinkedIn, or you can visit the website for more information. So I'd just once again like to say thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope to see you for the next one.